Welcome to South Florida saltwater fishing. I'm Heath, and it's time to get into the bite.
Dolphin in the boat, baby! Look at that foot.
You having fun?
Nice tail fish on a white bucktail jig. And we're almost like that. That's a rosie right there, man.
Alright folks, in this episode we're going to go over the best lures for trolling the deep reef. And not only are we going to cover what these lures are, we're going to go over the best tactic for using them, how to rig them, and what you'll catch with them. Before we get into this though, if you want to learn more about fishing, grow as an angler, just see some great and exciting offshore fishing adventures, you can start by hitting the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you won't miss a thing. Alright folks, we're going over the best lures for trolling the deep reef. The first thing you got to consider when you're trolling the deep reef is your tactics. You're not only going to want to fish up on top, because a good deal of your strikes and your catches are going to come from fishing that water column, which means we're going to need to know how to fish up on top and down in that water column. And what this effectively does is it helps you fish multiple layers and cover more ground at one time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with some of the most productive top water lures. These are lures that you're going to want to drag behind your boat up on top about 100 to 200 feet back. You're going to want to troll multiple lines, and you're going to want to try a couple of different items to see what the fish are going to hit. So to start off, we have this. This is called a Boone Turbo Hammer. It is in the color blue and silver. It is a 1/2 ounce chrome bullet style head with blue and silver mylar strips and some iridescent strips. I like to rig it up with about 7 to 10 feet of 40-pound monofilament leader, and I'll use a little barrel swivel to hook it onto my main line. Now I also have it hooked up with tandem double 5/0 hooks. The double hook setup helps you get into the bite and maintain it without having a false strike. That's why I use double hooks on most of my trolling lures. Alright, and when it comes to the Boone Turbo Hammer, the critters you're going to catch are going to be things like false albacore and blackfin tuna. You will also periodically get a sailfish strike on these. And when it's the right time of year and the mahi are swimming in close, this is known as the mahi slayer. I catch a ton of mahi every year with this particular lure. You're going to want to try to have at least one of these in your spread to give it a shot. I can pretty much guarantee you that this one will be the one getting hit. These are best trolled up on top at around 7 to 9 miles an hour. And now we're going to move on to the next top water lure, which is a squirt squid. So you can hook these up two different ways. You can either put a 1/4 ounce weight in the head of it, or you can do it like this and rig it on another 1/2 ounce chrome bullet head. And what I've done with this one is it's not just the squirt squid. It has what is called a flash witch trailing behind it. What's a flash witch? A plastic little head, and it has mylar strips behind it. Mylar is like bacon for fish. Everything loves to eat mylar in the ocean. So when I rig a squirt squid, trolling squid, I like to do the same thing as the Boone Turbo Hammer. It's a top water lure. We've got about 7 to 10 feet of 40-pound monofilament leader with a swivel, or you can tie it directly onto your line, 2 double 5/0 hooks. Now you say, hey, we're trolling the reef, why do you got mono? Well, we're taking a risk and we're not really down in the water column where those toothy critters are. But yes, it is a calculated risk. We might lose some due to cutoffs. And we're going to pretty much catch the same creatures as we were catching with the Boone Turbo Hammer. False albacore, blackfin tuna. Not so often the sailfish, but they will periodically hit it. And we're going to get those periodic mahi that come in close and tag it when the season is right. Trolling speed for this particular lure is similar, 7 to 10 miles an hour. 7 to 10 miles an hour is not very fast for a trolling lure. You're not going to outrun any of these fish. They like high-speed trolled lures. And we got to remember what trolling is. trolling is the pursuit of actively hunting fish, which means they're going to chase down the opportunity to feed. And now if you're just going with a squirt squid like this, you can always up your color differentiation. You can try something like this, a pink and yellow. See if you'll get bit with this color or with the dolphin color. See what the fish are going to bite, and then change over once you find what is actively getting hit. Adding the factor of a couple different colors in can only sort of help your hookup ratio, because some days fish hit different colored lures. Okay, so now we've gone over a couple of my favorite top water lures to troll. When we're trolling these, we're going to want to use medium to heavy trolling gear. These lures will get you into the hookup with pelagic fish that are going to pull drag and they're going to fight. When I'm trolling these, I like to use gear like heavy spinning rigs such as the Penn Spinfisher 8500 or medium class conventional reel like the Penn 12H. And if I'm going on the heavier side, I'll use something like a Penn International 30. And if I'm trolling with the medium class gear, we're going to be spooled up with 20-pound test monofilament. And on the heavier side, we're going to use something like 30-pound mono on our reel. And now for the last top water lure that I like to use, which is super effective also, is this. This is the white bucktail jig, one of the most effective lures for catching anything in the ocean. So using this lure, we're going to want to troll it with lighter gear, something like our yellowtail snapper spinners, Penn Spinfisher 5500, Penn Battle 5000, something small. You don't want to put this on a big heavy rig. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook this one up with 20-pound fluorocarbon, about 10 feet of it, and we'll want to use 12-pound test mono or braid as our main line. Now if we're trolling with braid, we're going to need at least a 50 to 75 foot leader, not about a 10 foot one. We need that shock absorbency. And so the fish you are going to catch with the bucktail jig is pretty much everything. Over the reef, I've caught sailfish with this. I've caught an uncountable amount of mahi with this, the false albacore, blackfin tuna, king mackerel. Like I said, anything in the ocean is really going to eat this. So if you're having an off day with other top water lures, you might want to consider giving this a shot. And so when we troll the bucktail jig, we're going to want to slow it down a little bit, somewhere between 5 and 7 miles an hour. You got to consider what happens when you're trolling is you have your lure's profile. The faster you go, the profile diminishes and becomes smaller. Okay, and so those were my favorite lures for trolling with top water. Now we're going to shift gears and we're going to talk about fishing that water column. And how are we going to fish that water column? Well, we're going to do planer trolling. What's a planer? These are planers. So what does a planer do? A planer helps your lure descend down into the water to a given depth. The bigger the planer, the deeper our lure will dive. Here's how a planer works. Your plate is connected to your lure. Your arm is connected to your main line of your reel. As it dives down, it is being pulled through the water and it sinks because of the pressure put on the plate. When a fish hits, it pulls the plate back. The planer does what's called tripping, and it helps the fish rise to the surface and you start the retrieval process. And again, we're going over planer trolling and the lures you're going to use, because down in that water column is where a good percentage of your fish over the deep reef are going to strike. Alright, so the first lure type I'm going to go over I consider to be the most productive for trolling the deep reef, and that is the Seawitch. What a Seawitch is it's a weighted head with fabric or mylar strips, and you put it in front of that little flash witch or a trolling skirt, something to give it a little bit of an additive. There comes a lot of confusion sometimes on how to rig it. If it looks like this, it's rigged right. If it is the opposite way and the short hairs are coming out the front, it's backwards. And so one of my favorite colors is this, pink and a little bit of white and a little bit of iridescent in it. And on my Seawitch lures, I have them hooked up with double 8/0 tandem hooks. This is also on 40-pound wire leader. So we're going down in the water column now where more toothy critters are bound to hit. Now the trick to using wire is to not use a swivel on the end of your wire leader when hooking it up to your 100-foot leader for planer troll. When you're planer trolling, you need 100 feet of leader, about 80-pound test between your planer and your lure. Otherwise, the fish are going to see this big clunky apparatus and be spooked and not hit your bait. So the trick to not using a swivel is you're going to want to use a solid ring at the end of your wire leader, and you're going to want to either crimp it or tie it on to your 100-foot leader. That way you don't have a swivel and you're actually increasing your hookup ratio because of the stealth factor and using a little bit less hardware. Now, when I'm using the Seawitch, I like to also add on a bonita strip to this lure. That gives it a little bit of scent, it gives it a little wiggling tail in the water, and it helps get you into the bite. Now, when it comes to the Seawitches, I like to use that pink and white, but I also like to use blue and white with a little bit of iridescent hairs in it too. And now the fish that we're going to catch on these Seawitches are fish like wahoo, king mackerel. We will catch the periodic blackfin tuna and the false albacore, and every once in a while you're going to get hit by a sailfish. So when we're trolling Seawitches and we have them down on a planer, we're going to want to try to do around 8 miles an hour. Planer trolling puts a ton of pressure on your rod, which means you're going to have to crank up your drag. Now, the gear that we got to use is specific gear because remember I said planer trolling puts a ton of pressure on your gear to dive down against the plate of the planer. I like to use gear like Penn International 30s, or if you've got Shimano, the TLDs are great. Either 30s or 50s work great for planer trolling. You need bigger class gear that has a heavier drag setting to hold against the resistance of the planer. And our rods at the same time need to be in that 50 to 80 pound class zone. You can go heavier, but like I said, you don't need to. I prefer the lighter stuff because again, that shock absorbency. The rod bends and helps fight against that initial shock of the fish pulling against the line. And now for our line on our rods, we're going to want to make sure we use braid as our main line for planer trolling. Braid helps your planer stay at a consistent depth because it doesn't stretch. Alright, and now we're going to move on to another very productive lure for trolling on the planer, and that is the drone spoon. What's the drone spoon going to catch you? It's going to catch you those toothy critters again. You're going to get fish like wahoo, barracuda, and king mackerel. This particular drone spoon is a 4.5-inch drone. I've got it hooked up on wire leader simply because of going for those toothy critters. What happens as you're trolling a drone spoon, it spins a lot. So what you're going to want to do when you hook up a drone spoon is you're going to want to use some sort of barrel swivel or ball bearing swivel to alleviate the line twist you're going to get as you're trolling through the water. And so we're planer trolling this drone spoon. It's getting down in the water column. You're going to want to do, again, about 7 to 8 miles an hour. And now a piece of advice when it comes to planer selection for the drone spoon. The drone spoon is spinning a lot, which means it puts a lot of resistance against your planer. The smaller planers tend to trip when you have a drone spoon on them because of the erratic action that it has as it's being trolled through the water. The bigger planers tend to resist being tripped by a drone spoon. Plain and simple. Alright, now we're going to move on to another couple of lures, which I consider hybrid lures. You can either have them down in the water column, or you can fish them up on top. They're both productive either way you decide to fish them. And the first one of them is one of my favorite. It's one of the most popular throughout the world. It is the Clark spoon. So this particular Clark spoon I have rigged up for trolling on top. I have it rigged up with 40-pound monofilament leader. If you want to put it down on a planer, I suggest getting it on some wire leader. It's a smaller lure. It's 3.5 inches. A fish will come up and inhale this whole thing. And if you've got it on mono and you hit a toothy critter, you can lose it. What are we going to catch with this? We're going to catch everything. We're going to catch blackfin tuna. We're going to catch false albacore. We will catch king mackerel. Every once in a great while, a wahoo will swim up and hit it. I've even had mahi-mahi hit these. These are great little lures, and what they do is they spin through the water just like the drone spoon. So you want to have a barrel swivel on it so it can alleviate that line twist. This lure creates a great small injured bait fish action, which is why it's so effective. It's an easy target for a pelagic predator to come and swallow it whole. And so if we're trolling on a planer, we're going to want to do planer trolling speed, around 8 miles an hour. If we've got it up on top, we can do the same thing, about 8 to 10 miles an hour. You might ask, this lure is so small and so lightweight, is it going to skip out of the water if I'm going that fast? No, it's not. If it is skipping up on top, you've got it too close to your boat. Let out some more line and that'll get it just below the surface and it'll be acting the way that it should. And if you have this up on top, what's going to happen as you're trolling it is you're going to see the tip of your rod bouncing. That's how you know it's trolling right. Alright, and now we're going to go over our last lure for trolling a deep reef. Again, another hybrid lure. And what it is it's the white trolling feather. Trolling up on top, we're going to use about 8 to 10 feet of monofilament with 2 double 5/0 hooks. Or if we're trolling down with the planer, we're going to use about 14 to 16 inches of wire leader and we're going to use 2 8/0 hooks. This lure will catch you the same stuff. It'll catch you the mahi-mahi. It's also going to catch you false albacore and blackfin tuna. And down deep in the water column, it's going to catch you things like barracuda and king mackerel. And we're going to use the same tactic, gear, and speeds as we would for the other lures. Down deep on a planer, Penn International 30s and Shimano TLDs. Up on top, that 15 to 30 pound class trolling gear, that mid-sized stuff. Alright, so those are personally what I believe to be the best lures for trolling the deep reef. And not only the best lures, but the best tactics. Like I said, we gotta not only troll stuff up on top, because a good percentage of our fish are down there in the water column. And by using different size planers, we can actually find out what depth they're at. Now I'm going to cover the last short tip for trolling the deep reef. So if we're looking at our GPS, let me show you what these reefs look like. This is typically what our first reef looks like on our GPS. This reef runs from about 30 feet to about 70 feet. Then we run into our second reef. On our GPS, it looks like a bunch of packed in tight contour lines. So these contour lines on the second reef are packed in tight and then they start spreading out. Once they start spreading out, you are no longer on your second reef. The second reef runs from about 90 feet all the way down to about 150 feet. This is not our deep reef. This is not where we're talking about fishing. We're talking about fishing our third reef, the deep reef. The deep reef, all of a sudden you'll see your contour lines start to pack in tighter again. And then when they start spreading out again, down deeper, you are off your third reef. The third reef out here off our South Florida coast runs from about 200 feet to 300 feet. Not only is this the zone we want to troll, let me show you how we're going to do it. The first thing we're not going to do is we're not going to troll up and down the coast in a straight line. That's not how bait fish act. What we're going to do is we're going to learn to troll like bait fish look. Now, how do bait fish look when they are traversing the reef and trying to stay alive and avoid getting eaten by predators? It's simple. They zig and zag in and out of the reef. So this is how you're going to troll. You're going to troll in S-shaped curves in and out of this reef, up and down. So you'll want to start in a little shallower, maybe 150 and head out to about 300, maybe 350 and then skirt back in, as long as you are going in trolling over the reef. So here's the thing, if you only go to 200 and then you turn back around and you go to 300, you're not necessarily dragging your baits that are 100 feet behind your boat over a reef. You want to make sure you go way past it and then come back in and then go a little bit shallower over it and then pull your baits back over it. And the last tidbit before we sign off, you're asking yourself, hey, I know these lures now, so when do I fish them? So I typically like to fish the reef early in the morning, from about sunrise for about the first 3 to 4 hours of the sun coming up, which is typically around 7 a.m. to 11. Okay, and then you might say to yourself, okay, well that's good, but what's the best time of year to troll the deep reef? The best bite starts to turn on in the springtime. In mid-March, the bite will start to come to life. The wahoo, the king mackerel. You will get the mahi starting to come in for the early spring to summer run. The sailfish bite should still be hot from the winter months. The blackfin tuna bite should be solid. Your false albacore are going to start showing up and being relentless also. And now this bite is going to stay strong for almost 6 months into November. Starting in November, this pelagic reef bite will tend to slow down. Alright folks, that about does it for this episode. Hope you had fun, hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit about what I consider to be the top lures for trolling the deep reef. Till next time, South Florida saltwater fishing, going wherever the cool wind takes us.